We have a lot to get to today, so we're going to jump right in here. Another boat strike. That's right. Another boat strike off of or I should say in the Pacific Ocean, not this time in the Caribbean Sea, which is a significant development as it suggests that the peace president is expanding military operations from one side of the South American continent to the other. So Fox News has an alert on this.
Launching its 8th strike on a suspected drug trafficking boat, this time in the Pacific Ocean. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says 2 narco-terrorists were killed in this one. No U.S. forces hurt. He says the boat was operated by a designated terrorist organization. National correspondent Griff Jenkins with me here now in Washington. Hi, Griff.
Hi, Aisha. And it is the 8th strike that we've seen since the beginning of September, but it's the first in the Eastern Pacific, just off the coast of Colombia. The previous 7 strikes were all in the Caribbean. Now, Secretary of War Hegseth says the vessel was struck yesterday while being operated allegedly by a designated terrorist organization, posting this video you see here and adding this. The vessel was known by our intelligence to be involved in illicit narcotics smuggling, was transiting along a known narco-trafficking transit route and carrying narcotics. There were 2 narco-terrorists aboard the vessel during the strike, which was conducted in international waters. Both terrorists were killed and no U.S. forces were harmed in this strike. Narco-terrorists intending to bring poison to our shores will find no safe harbor anywhere in our hemisphere, just as al-Qaeda waged war on our homeland. These cartels are waging war on our border and our people. There will be no refuge or forgiveness, only justice. That message pretty clear there, Aisha. Now, the 2 casualties brings the death toll from all the strikes to 34 people. And it comes as President Trump asserts that the U.S. is engaged in a, quote, armed conflict with drug cartels. But, Aisha, there's a lot of unanswered questions here.
Right. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. So he says that Pete Hegseth was pretty clear there. Yeah, pretty clear in his, maniacal warmongering posture. But not so clear as to the specifics of what exactly happened. He refers to them as narco-terrorists, but doesn't say who they are or where they're from or what terrorist organization or foreign gang or cartel they belong to. And this will come up a little later in the piece, but I just should put this here just so everyone understands. Here's a map of South America. So Venezuela is the sort of forest green country, the northernmost forest green country there. That's on the Caribbean Sea side. And then there's Panama, which blocks off the Caribbean Sea from the Pacific Ocean, which means that if these narco terrorists were from Venezuela and the boat was in the Pacific, they'd have had to gone through Colombia to get to that side, right? Which makes it unlikely that this vessel was full of Venezuelans, right? Because they can't access that side unless they go through Colombia. So you have on the other side of things, on the east side of the continent, you have Colombia, the big purple country there, which is kind of split between the Caribbean side and the Pacific side. Then you have this small yellow country, which is Ecuador, and then Peru, which is colored forest green. All 3 of those countries, are suspects in the eyes of the Trump team. And so it could be from any of those 3, but there's actually no details provided about who these people actually were, which you might think would be information you'd want to know, given that we just murdered a bunch of them.
Regarding this strike, like the identities or nationalities of the alleged drug traffickers, what kind of drugs were on the boat, and what kind of strike was carried out? Was this a U.S. drone strike, or did they use a different weapon system? We've got calls out to the Pentagon for more details. So far, though, we're just being referred to Secretary of Hegseth's statement. But one thing is for sure, these strikes are likely to continue.
They will.
They will. Yes, they will. So basically, what they're saying there is they have no information. No information. This is different from the others because it's in the Pacific Ocean, and we just showed you the map. Makes it unlikely that these are Venezuelans. Don't forget the 2 who were caught and released back to their home countries recently were from Colombia and Ecuador, which is on the Pacific Ocean side of the Panama Divide. And yes, just a reminder, by the way, the U.S. has repatriated survivors of its strike on the suspected drug vessel. So they just caught and released two of these supposed narco terrorists. So just to recap, because we've done a couple segments about this, the standard practice is if you apprehend a vessel carrying illicit drugs into your waters, what you do as a matter of course normally is you have the Coast Guard apprehend them and then prosecute them. That's not what the Trump administration is doing. They are shooting first and asking no questions later. And so this obviously struck a lot of people as being very suspicious, because if these people are who we say they are, wouldn't we want to detain them and try them and get more information out of them? If they're not who we say they are, well, that's reason not to want to charge them and try them, because that would expose the lie. And of course, if you are apprehending people and trying them and detaining them, then that means that it's not a military conflict. In other words, you can handle this the way you handle other law enforcement matters, which is you apprehend criminals and you put them through the justice system. So this struck Rand Paul as kind of strange. So here he is going on Fox News, making his case against these summary executions of unknown people.
Is one of the recent explosions, a bunch of the people. One of the interesting thing is one of the recent explosions, a bunch of the people on the boats died, but 2 people survived. Did we detain them and check them for drugs or drug residue? Did we gather the evidence from the wreckage and then prosecute them? No, we just said, oh, well, we're going to send you back to your country. So I really think that you cannot have a policy where you just allege that someone is guilty of something and then kill them. The reason being that we interdict ships all the time off the coast of Miami, off the coast of California, and the Coast Guard statistics say that about 25% of the boats that we stop to search don't have any drugs. So if 1 out of 4 of the boats don't have drugs on them, you know, what kind of person would justify blowing up people when 1 out of 4 boats may well not have drugs on them?
So don't do it again. Is that the message?
Well, what the message is that, and this has been fought in the Senate, will be fought again next week, is you do get to kill people when you're at war. So if we are to be at war, the Constitution says Congress has to vote for a declaration of war. I'm not for declaring war with Venezuela. I despise socialism, communism, authoritarianism, but I'm not in favor of starting a war with Venezuela. If you have a war, you can kill the enemy. If you don't have a war, you have international crime, and you have to treat it as such. And really, the seas, even in international waters, there have been rules of engagements for over a century, and they don't involve blowing people up without first asking them if they will allow to be boarded to be searched.
Yeah, pretty simple stuff there. Nothing too complicated. Locals undercut Trump claims about Venezuela drug boats. The Trump administration's justification for blowing up suspected drug traffickers off the Venezuelan coast has been clear and consistent. These people aren't just criminals, they're narco-terrorists smuggling a deadly weapon poisoning Americans at the behest of terrorist organizations. Claiming the power to summarily kill traffickers as though they're enemy troops, Trump has authorized the U.S. military to strike at least 6 speedboats. This was written last week, so they're a little behind the times, now up to 8. The administration has deemed suspicious killing dozens of people since the beginning of September. At least half of the strikes and 21 of the killings, locals say, have transpired in the waters between Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, nations so close that on clear days they're within sight of each other. But records and interviews with 20 people familiar with the route or strikes, including current and former U.S. and international officials, contradict the administration's claims. The passage, they said, is not ordinarily used to traffic synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, present in 69% of drug overdose deaths last year, nor are drugs typically headed for the United States. Trinidad and Tobago, a Caribbean nation more than 1,000 miles south and 1,200 miles east of Miami, is both a destination market for marijuana and a transshipment point for South American cocaine bound for West Africa and Europe, according to U.S. officials. Trinidadian police and independent analysts, the fentanyl seized in the U.S., in contrast, is typically manufactured in Mexico using precursors from China and smuggled in through the land border, most often by U.S. citizens. The military strikes are unlikely as a result to cut overdose deaths in the U.S., officials say, but it has brought U.S. forces into striking distance of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Well, there it is. Kind of buried the lead there, Washington Post. Big surprise. When I saw an internal document on the strikes, a senior U.S. national security official said, I immediately thought, this isn't about terrorists. This is about Venezuela and regime change. But there was no information about what it was really about. So once again, just to reiterate, I showed you this earlier, the map there, it's very unlikely that this vessel that they just blew up came, or I should not say it did not come from Venezuela, couldn't have come from Venezuela unless it went all the way around the continent. But it's unlikely that those were Venezuelans on board, which means the gangs that come from Venezuela were probably not on that boat. So who was it, right? And does that not beg the question, do they have their eyes set on more than just the Venezuelans? Because Trump has been talking tough against Colombia as well. Trump calls the president of Colombia a thug and warns he better watch it or will take very serious action against him and his country. So the peace president's now talking tough, not just against Venezuela, but Colombia as well. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll save it.
We're talking about now Colombia, the country, not the university.
Yes.
Go ahead. He said what?
He said that if you won't change, then perhaps you need to be gotten rid of. Do you view that as a threat?
Well, he's a thug and bad guy. He's a guy that is making a lot of drugs. We've just, as of today, stopped all payments going to Colombia, the country Colombia. Also, the school Colombia. No, we settled. We made a settlement with them. But
they decided they were going to be nice to my Jewish master, so we made a settlement to that. Yes.
He's a thug, and he's a bad guy, and he's hurt his country very badly. They're doing very poorly, Colombia. They make cocaine. They have cocaine factories. They grow all sorts of crap that's drugs, bad drugs coming into the United States, goes generally through Mexico. And he better watch it or we'll take very serious action against him and his country. His country is, what he has led his country into is a death trap.
Yep, so there he is, talking tough against Gustavo Petro. Here is Colombian President Gustavo Petro. Mr. Trump is furious that I don't support the Americans with the Colombian army to invade Venezuela. So here he is with his take on escalating tensions between, I guess, the three countries in total now. He is responsible for unleashing a policy that drove millions of Venezuelans out. And now he's kicking Venezuelans out by force. And that's not done. But the person primarily responsible is Mr. Trump. And it must be said, politics is a boomerang. Mr. Trump has been in power for 9 months. Mr. Trump governed before, my friend. Look at his first administration and see what happened there. There was almost a war between Colombia and Venezuela. So Petro was not president of Colombia during the first Trump term. Mr. Trump is furious that I don't support the Americans with the Colombian army to invade Venezuela. No, sir. What stupid Colombian would think of helping to invade where his cousins, nephews, his Colombian people, who number 4 million are, so they can be killed like in Gaza? Yeah. Yep. There you go. There you go. Not playing ball. And for anybody who doubts what this is actually about, speaking of the first Trump administration was poised to attack Venezuela. The reason is not narco trafficking. The reason is to steal Venezuela's oil. So here is Elliot Abrams on Venezuela during the first Trump administration. I forget what his exact title was, but he was one of the higher ups here. Here he is just laying it all out. This was back when they tried to coup Venezuela in the first Trump term.
One of the reasons that we have, I guess twice now, given a license to Chevron and a number of service companies is precisely to make it easier for them to help in the recovery of oil production after the regime is replaced and there's a return to democracy. But I think we shouldn't be under any illusions. That's going to be a multi-year project because the amount of investment by this regime has been pitiful.
Wow. Okay, so here we go. He was the U.S. Special Representative for Venezuela from 2019 to 2021. So there you go. That explains that. Let's take a look at one of these things.
After the regime is replaced. service companies is precisely
play this again.
one of the reasons that we have, I guess twice now, given a license to Chevron and a number of service companies is precisely to make it easier for them to help in the recovery of oil production after the regime is replaced and there's a return to democracy. But I think we shouldn't be under any illusion.
So after there's a return to democracy, we'll have our oil companies in place to take advantage. So there you go. I mean, he's just saying it very plainly. And thank you. I couldn't put my finger on it. This guy looks like a literal puppet. Who's the famous puppeteer? The guy who does the comedy puppet albums? The Chad will know. I forget. He looks like one of those, like one of those guys' puppets. That's what he looks like. Absolutely. And that is very, very fitting in his case. So that's obviously what this is about. If you look back to officials in the first Trump administration, they just come right out and say it. Gustavo Petro knows that's what this is about. Obviously, Maduro himself knows what this is about. According to the Washington Post, people who are working in government right now know that that's what this is about. It's no secret. It's just so pathetic to think that there are people out here who will toe the party line on this. And if you really want to take a look, I just had to include this in this segment. You really want to take a look at just how far MAGA has fallen as a movement, because we played Rand Paul earlier in this segment objecting to these summary executions. Cat Turd comes out saying, LOL, imagine these two completely weak beta male dorks running the country. It would be a disaster. That's in response to this guy's tweet here. Antoon says, I'd take this over J.D. Vance any day. Yeah, I think there are a number of like former MAGA people or, right-wing people who are starting to see that, there's something going on in Kentucky where that's where, like the principled conservatives actually live. I have plenty of disagreements with Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, but ironically, they're some of the only people in government who are like actually standing up for a lot of the principles that Donald Trump ran on, but is not living up to, like no new useless wars and protection of free speech, right? They seem to actually take those principles seriously, whereas the MAGA army, as you could see, just absolute bottom-feeding hacks like Cat Turd, and you see the ethos of the movement really reveal itself here. They're they're weak, dorky beta males. Why? Because they don't want to blow up boats. Yeah, why? In what way?
I'm fairly certain. I mean, he hides behind his Cat Turd avatar. I would bet dollars to donuts that either one of these guys could kick the living shit out of whoever runs that account.
Yeah, well, besides that, I said 95% of your followers are virgins and the other 5 were fucked by Epstein. Yeah, exactly. But this is indicative of the messaging now. This is indicative of where the MAGA base is that still supports Donald Trump. It's really not about the policies or the principles at all. This is a movement of weak, broken men who find an illusion of power in associating themselves with who they view as the alpha male. And the alpha male can do what the alpha male wants. That's why he's the alpha male. There is in no element of this any allegiance to any kind of principle whatsoever. And the people who do stand up to it, they get ostracized as weak. Why? Because the only distinction that matters within the Trump movement right now is strength versus weakness. It's might makes right. That's it. It's just as naked as that, because this is just one in a long list of betrayals of the supposed principles of MAGA. Tucker Carlson spoke at TPUSA, and I found it kind of boilerplate. But one of the things he went through was sort of the 5 key pillars of MAGA, many of which are being betrayed right now, including, of course, no pointless new wars and protection of free speech. And when you got guys like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie stick their necks out in defense of those principles, they get shit on. And in this context, you obviously see no allegiance to any kind of principle whatsoever. This is just old school imperialism, on steroids, now taking the fight beyond Venezuela, but to all of these countries. We want to dominate Central and South America. That has been the project of the American empire for decades and decades and decades. That's why you have the Organization of American States. That's why you have CIA involvement in. There's a graphic that we showed on our show a while ago. Jimmy showed a while back. All of the CIA coups of all these different countries.
Right.
This is just old school imperialism and domination. There's nothing edgy about it. There's nothing new about it. There's certainly nothing America first about it.
Yeah. So Gunther Eagleman last week, for like 4 or 5 days running, was just tweeting out, well, if you go to the march, they take away your man card. I don't make the rules. Right, you're not a man. If you don't do this, if you do that, you're not a man.
Yeah.
All right. This is what's actually happening. There's a guy, he's kind of blowing up a little bit on YouTube now with his lectures, Professor Zhang. He's from China, but he's in Canada now. And he has some really interesting takes on the underlying psychology of all this and its link to historical precedents. He would frame this. I haven't heard him speak specifically about this, but he spoke this way about Gaza, as really being connected to the tradition of creating societal cohesion with human sacrifice. Like, what are you celebrating? Like, what message are you putting out when you're blowing up fishermen in boats? Like, what is that to celebrate? It's a modern version of human sacrifice. And what is the purpose of that? Social cohesion. It's because you're taking group responsibility for taking these lives, right? It's making you complicit. It's like when you had to, take a turn in Vietnam where the other guys would frag you, right? You're all in on the crime.
Right.
Now, there's that element, but in terms of what's actually going on here, in preparation for my upcoming trip, I've really been studying a lot about what's happening in China and what China is doing. I mean, a lot of our audience probably already knows this. The engineering projects they're doing are insane.
Yes.
They just built the world's tallest bridge. They're building new rail lines where they're inventing technology that's never existed. They're cutting down travel times between cities from 12 hours to an hour by going under rivers, and they're inventing their own boring machines because of special problems with this. They're creating the world's most complex railways to link up the different regions of China. It's a vast country. A lot of it is kind of in the hinterland. They're bringing it all together into one unit. They're creating canals that are fucking insane technologically. And a lot of it, as an American watching that, it really blows up the myth that America and the West generally has lived on to pump itself up relative to the East. Well, because we have such a dynamic, individualistic culture, we're always more inventive. We're always better at coming up with new creative solutions. No. You look at that shit, it's what's really happening here is your classic shift where the old power is dying and a new power is rising. And that is always accompanied by the new power having a dynamism and an energy where it's inventing new ways of doing things that the old power is too set in its ways to do. The United States was embracing oil while England was still hung up on coal because they had built their empire on coal. The previous empire will tend to be hung up on the technology that it was the innovator in and be very hesitant to move on into the future in that way. China's building the most massive renewable energy projects anywhere in the world. It's building power storage plants on a scale never seen in the world before. And one of the things they're doing right now is they're building a port in Peru that is going to make it much easier for South America to have direct trade links with China.
Right, right.
So what do we have? What do we have? Bombs. That's all we have. Fucking bombs and military. We see, our oligarchs see that their power is passing to the east. Now, it's not just China. It's Asia in general is rapidly becoming more technologically advanced, which is naturally going to be followed by more prosperous than we are. The quality of life, the per capita income is going to be greater than ours, not, in 100 years, like 10, 20 years. We're going to be the poor. Why are the Westerners so backwards?
Right.
That's where this is going. And they know it. What's the one thing we have? What's the one advantage we have? That we have this enormous fucking military. That is why they're making moves to start to use that military to basically invade South America. It's to counter this historic cycle that anyone who's paying attention can see is happening, where, and this is not even a question of whether you like China, don't like China. There's a cycle of history where clearly the center of gravity in world leadership is moving to China, and the only thing we have to counter it is our military.
Right. And that also explains why this strike in the Pacific happened, because this is very unlikely about Venezuelan gangs. I mean, it's possible they crossed through Colombia, but that's not likely. What's much more likely is this is Colombia, Ecuador, or Peru. Right.
Right. You install a puppet like Machado there, and now you've got a base to launch military actions against the rest of South America.
Right. Exactly. So that is just one more chapter. I mean, look, they're clearly not going to stop until they get regime change in Venezuela. They tried that the first time. They tried it the clean way. They tried it the nice way the first time, and it failed. And they're going to keep trying until they get it, and it doesn't look like they're going to stop there. It looks like any South American country that is not landlocked, at least to start with, better play ball, or else they're next. That's the message that is being sent from Washington now, no doubt.
Please clap.